How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Coal Mine Photography, where we talk about photography, videography, and the technology used in both. Have you ever heard someone say it's the small things in life that matter the most? I really like that quote and thought what better way to start this channel than with a tutorial that's focused on the small thing. When I first started photography, one of the techniques I was most interested in learning was macro photography. Now, what is macro photography, you say? Let's take a minute to learn about what macro photography is. Macro photography is a style of photography where you take extreme close-ups of your subject. In most cases for macro photography, the subject is very small. The first concepts of macro photography called for the subjects to be one-to-one or life-size or even larger in the negative or the image sensor. Because of this, one of the most popular types of macro photography is pictures of insects. People are most interested in pictures of things that they see in day-to-day life when the aspect is changed into a way they never conceptualized before. Macro photography allows us to take this aspect and shift it to the extreme to make things that we see that are mundane and turn them into something very interesting again. Now, quality DSLR cameras are not cheap, and neither are the lenses that go with them. Nowadays, you can even find macro lenses that go on your phone. However, in this tutorial, I'm going to be using a DSLR because I prefer the flexibility that I can gain. Now, dedicated macro lenses, like all other camera lenses, can be very expensive. If your primary focus is going to be macro photography, then it might be worthwhile to invest in a dedicated macro lens. If you're like me and like to dabble in multiple styles of photography, or just want to experiment first, then I would suggest using extension tubes. Extension tubes are available for almost any type of camera. These extension tubes can take your existing lens set and make them work for macro photography. Most extension tubes have no optics and just act as a spacer between your lens and your camera body. Extension tubes come in multiple sizes and can even be stacked to increase this space. Now, I won't go into the science of it too much, but an extension tube essentially allows the lens to be moved closer to the object and still be able to maintain focus. Most extension tubes, and especially the cheaper ones, do not include electronics, so they are unable to pass through the ability of autofocus from your lens to your camera. Because of this, you may have to use manual focus. Because you will be having to manually focus your lens, it is also important to have a sturdy tripod so that it is much easier to focus on your subject. A tripod is also important because in macro photography, you may need a lot more light. And with a tripod, you can take longer exposures. The really cool thing about macro photography is because you are taking pictures of things that are so small, you can make an entire photography set out of just a small space. Check out how I made a macro photography set just using my desk. You can see I use simple printer paper to create a background. For my subject, I decided to take a bunch of colored pencils and tape them together and then try and capture something that people aren't used to seeing in colored pencils. Now let's get down to the process of actually taking the picture. Because my office is really dark, I knew that for my composition, I would need to bring in some extra light. I used two Viltrox LED lights to light this small set. I set up one of the lights behind the paper to backlight the subject, and I decided to experiment and used a blue gel to add a little bit of that blue background. I used the second light handheld and was able to add the correct amount of light that I wanted on the subject. These are really great lights and they work great in multiple different situations. They're also very affordable, especially if you're on a budget like I am. In my studio, you will also see those lights being used behind my monitors as a little bit of accent lighting. I've included links to these lights in the description below. The camera I decided to use is my trusty Nikon D610 DSLR camera. And this is a consumer level full frame offering from Nikon. The lens that I decided to use is a 50mm 1.8. I really like this lens because it works really great with extension tubes. Also, because I need to add a little bit of that extra light, this lens works really great because I'm able to open up that aperture really wide to get a bunch more light in. Also, because the aperture is very wide, I am able to create an out of focus background. For the actual photo itself, I wanted to create an effect where the front row of pencils were in perfect focus, but then as you moved further back in the rows of pencils, it got more and more out of focus. In order to do this, I decided to tape the pencils together in a circle, and then this created multiple rows of pencils. With all this set up, here's a look at the final product I was able to capture. Overall, I'm extremely pleased with how well this photo turned out. The setup was extremely easy, took very little time, and required very minimal equipment to achieve this image. So maybe the next time the weather outside is looking a little rough, try setting up a set in your own home and start experimenting with macro photography yourself. Share some of the photos you're able to capture, and also let me know if you have any questions. If you learned something new, please contribute to the comments. Also consider liking, sharing, or subscribing to the channel. Catch you all in the next video.